Hi, it's Dawn from Dawn's Dirt. Durkamine gardening, Durkamine politics, Durkamine religion, Durkamine farm to table sales, Durkamine canning, Durkamine anything homesteading, really. Durkamine anything I want it to mean because it's the show Dawn's Dirt. So welcome here. Thanks so much for tuning in today. So, I want to start off today by telling you a bit of a joke. Someone asked a farmer what he does with his time off, and the farmer replied to him, "What's time off?" And there is so much truth to that. Farmers work very, very hard. Farmers outwork and outpace most people I even know. I said I'd talk about religion once in a while. So there's a Bible story or a Bible thing that talks about like when your donkey falls in a well, you have to get it out. Same thing with farmers. Farmers will do what they got to do for their farm to get their crops in or their vegetables harvested or their fruit or their animals fed and watered. It could be minus 40 outside and a farmer is still feeding their cows. They will figure out how to get that tractor going to get the feed. And even if they can't get the tractor going, they will figure out how to move a bale of hay, even if they have to lift it up one piece by one piece at a time, because that's what farmers do. They do what they got to do to get the job done. The farmers have more grit than most people I know. So we're going to talk today about food freedom and farming. We're going to talk about a farmer's mindset and why they're wired the way they are. And we're also going to talk about why we need more small farmers. It's so important. More small farmers is the key, I think, to food security and food security globally. If we have more small farmers, we're going to have less hunger in the world. So food freedom means raising your own food and buying direct from farmers and not being controlled by the grocery stores or government. And this is so, so important. If you've listened to my podcast for a while, you've realized that I've kind of got a bit of an awake mind. I see things through different glasses. I talk about things differently. I see the world differently and I question everything. So, I've thought about this the other day. I'm 44 years old and I actually have less answers and less sure things that I know about now than what I did, back in my 20s and 30s for sure. And so I question everything and I question our food system, especially after 2020 and 2021. Like that just sent my entire world into a tailspin. And I was like, whoa, like what is happening? And he who controls the food controls the people. And I've been seeing it coming. And I actually saw it coming from even before then. The first time I saw it coming, this whole like globalization or big food system, the first time I really saw it coming was back in about 2017, 2016, 2017, 2018, maybe somewhere in there. We were selling produce. As many of you know, I had a 36,000 square foot greenhouse and I grew cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers, and we were selling our produce direct to the grocery store. So first we started off selling to the warehouse and that wasn't working so well. So then we started selling to the grocery store and we got a better price, but the grocery stores started demanding Canada Gap certification. And so what that meant was we needed a little piece of paper that cost $7,000 by the time you checked and balanced all the things and you went through all the hoops the bureaucratic hoops that they wanted you to go through to get checked out to make sure that your farm was quote unquote safe to sell produce to the local grocery store. And I was like, it costs $7,000 to do this. And we're only selling about $20,000 worth of wholesale produce through your store. Like this just doesn't make sense. Canada Gap certification is where they come in and they check out your farm, and it makes sense. It does honestly make sense. If you've got a potato farmer in Prince Edward Island and he's, selling potatoes right across Canada, you want to know that that farm is safe. You want to know what he's been spraying and what he's been doing and things like that. Because an outbreak or something, if something goes sideways with his potatoes, it's going to be harder to find him because he's in all of the grocery stores right across Canada. But for me, I was just a little guy. I just was in 2 little grocery stores and a handful of farmers markets at that point in time. And if there was something wrong with my vegetables that we were making people sick, it would be an easy find. People would be able to, like, the outbreak would be in these 2 local grocery stores and these farmers markets. You'd pinpoint it real quick and you'd point to my former farm and you go, boom, there's the problem. And so I was like, this just does not make sense for the size that we are. And they said, too bad. So we pulled out of grocery stores. We made the really hard decision. And at that point, I started questioning the system and I started saying, if we have to jump through these bureaucratic hoops, and there's more out there in meat and in dairy, and I mean dairy, it's controlled by the oh, what's the board called? The supply and demand, like the supply chain program. And so with quotas and things like that. So dairy's supply chain and chicken is supply chain. And so they're controlled as to how much we're producing and how much we're making and the pricing it's being paid out at and things like that. And so it kind of it does help the farmer, but at the same time, like the bureaucracy, if we keep getting more and more big farmers and the bureaucracy coming down the pipes as to this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, we're going to be trapped into a big food system. I mean, in agriculture, the chicken farmers are getting bigger, the grain farmers are getting bigger, the dairy farmers are getting bigger. Back when I was growing up, my grandparents had a dairy farm. And I can remember my grandparents, they were milking, I don't know, 40 cows or 50 cows. I don't even know, but not a whole lot of cows. And they made a great living at it. And now I think if you've got a dairy less than 100 or 200, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you don't have 1 or 200 or 300 cows in your dairy farm, you're not making ends meet. And if you've got a whole pile of debt, you're really not making ends meet because the quota costs so much. Me and my ex-husband, we looked into dairy back in the day, and it was going to be over $1 million to get in, and that was in 2007. So can you imagine what it would be now? Like, it's insane. And so, yeah, the bureaucracy is coming down the pipes. And again, whenever the Canada Gap thing went down with my farm, I thought to myself, yeah, he who controls the food controls the people. And that is a scary time and a scary place to be. So, yeah. And if you look at BC tree fruits, last summer, the BC tree fruits warehouse shut down. And it was a cooperative of farmers and they shut down for whatever reason. And it just shows the fragility of the system. The system is broken and the system is, we need our farmers and we need our small farmers now more than ever. And I was part of a co-op. They ended up owing me $30,000 at one point in time. And yeah, like it's just, we need our small farmers to survive and thrive. And so that co-op went by the wayside. My farm went by the wayside. Even when I sold my farm, I was like screaming. I was jumping up and down. I can remember being at one of my last farmers markets of my vegetable sales career at farmers market, and there was another woman there, and she's part of it doesn't matter. Anyways, there was a woman there, and she was arguing with me about my food and about where food comes from and where vegetables were coming from. And I remember jumping up and down saying, like, it is so important. If we don't protect our small farmers, we're not going to have a small farmer left. And I was jumping up and down, almost yelling at the fact that we are not going to have a small farmer left. And, here we are a couple years later, and there's even more farmers since that conversation, since me jumping up and down, waving the flag, saying like, whoa, we're in for some big trouble. There's been even more farmers, vegetable farmers, that have stopped growing and selling vegetables in the province of Alberta because it's so hard. Now, having said that, on a large scale, these were large scale farmers that were growing and selling. My farm was huge. It was 36,000 square foot greenhouse and many acres of garden. There is a small opportunity. There's more opportunity for small scale farmers. And let me tell you, if I didn't have the non-compete clause in the province of Alberta, I'd be buying a little tractor and I'd be having a vegetable farm again. So, like, as much as I'm saying, like, if we don't protect our small farmers, there is opportunity for more small farmers to come up. But I'll get to that later in the show. The government is now pushing this ban on proteins. Really, they're saying eat less meat. Maybe a vegetarian diet is where you should go. Yeah, they're totally against the beef industry. They're trying to, demonize the chicken industry and the meat, the proteins, the dairy industry. And so if I think a certain climate change guru government officials and the WHO and the WEF and all of those, if they had their way, we would not be eating anything from animals. We would be eating our soy, and we would be eating our grains and our cereals from the grocery store. Those are somewhat healthy, aren't they? And I don't get it. So if we go to this vegetarian or vegan diet, like where we don't have animal based products, like I don't think it's healthy, because then we're going to Cheerios, canola oil, bread. And I was in a grocery store the other day and I was looking for some buns, and I was like, you can't even get non chemical buns anymore. Like, they are all just made in big warehouses with preservatives and preservatives and preservatives so that they don't go bad on the grocery store shelves. Whereas back in the day, like, I even worked in a bakery. I worked in a little bakery, and they made the buns there, and they, rolled the dough, and they made the buns, and they had fresh bread. And fresh bread, I can remember, it was 99 cents a loaf, and then it went up to $1.29 a loaf for a loaf of fresh homemade bread at this grocery store. It was a little grocery store chain, but that was, I don't know, I was 18, 16, 17, 18 at the time, and look at where we've come to now. You can't even get that. You have to buy the Wonder Bread that's full of, I don't know. The list of ingredients is long. Let me just put it that way. I don't think it's food. Yeah, so who controls the food controls the people, and the food freedom is where we need to take it back to, because we the people have to have our freedom and our security in our food system. It's why the whole homesteading movement is even gaining steam. Are you sitting on a farm or homestead that could be making you real money? Tired of guessing on how to market your products? I owned a 36,000 square foot greenhouse. I ran 2 farm to table stores. I had 30 people on payroll. I brought in $2.5 million in gross revenue in 2020, selling farm goods directly to customers. Now I teach farmers and homesteaders how to make money and save money off the land they already have. Whether you're selling eggs, beef, produce, baked goods, or anything in between, if you want to get into direct marketing and grow your sales, I'm the girl for you. Stop leaving money on the table and start putting it into your bank account. Join me at Dawn's Dirt Business Coaching, and let's make your farm pay you back. So let's talk about the farmer's mindset. So farmers don't think in terms of weekends or holidays, or people used to say to me, "Oh, have a great weekend," and I would turn to them and I'd say, "What's a weekend? I don't even know what a weekend is," because I just worked. And I was thinking back in the day, like I've been doing one farmer's market a week, and it's been working really well. I'll gross about 30 grand. I will net some profit off of that, and it's been working really well. For me again. And like I said, if I was able to sell vegetables in the province of Alberta, I would do it in a heartbeat tomorrow, because there is money to be made there. There is meat on those bones, and you can do it. So I'm doing one farmer's market a week right now, and it's a 16-hour day on Thursdays. I go to Canmore to the farmer's market, and I get home, and let me tell you, I'm tired on Friday. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm getting old, but I am tired on Friday. And then, I was thinking, I've been thinking about that lately in the last few weeks here. And I thought, man, I physically don't know how I did it. I was doing like 16-hour days, 6 days in a row, 7 days in a row sometimes. There was the last summer I farmed, I could probably count on one hand the amount of days off I took off in a summer. And so, like, farmers just are wired differently. I don't know how I did it, but I did it, and I loved it. That's the thing. I cried. I wept when I sold my farm. And the crazy thing is even still today, like I've mentioned, I would get right back into it. That's why I've got the chickens. That's why, I would get right back into farming. I would get right back into all that hard work and all the whatever, because the reward is so great. Seeing the kids with their tomatoes, or seeing the kids with their vegetables, that's where the reward is. It's building the relationship. And I've talked about on the show many, many times before. But farmers are made up of something different. Farmers have grit. And so the very last season I was farming, it was my very first Bears Paw farmers market. I was offloading the truck full of produce, or my trailer full of produce. I was offloading it all. And boom, I stepped out of the trailer funny, rolled my ankle so bad, and my foot swelled up right away. And I finished the market. I sat on a chair, which was not normal for me. I had some girlfriends helping me. And I finished the market, and I went to the hospital that afternoon, and sure enough, I had rolled it so bad, I broke a little bone in my foot. And so the doctor, they're like, "You need to take it easy." And I'm like, no, like, my season just started. So I'm not staying off this foot. It just ain't going to happen. I said, you either got to put me in a cast so I can't walk on it, or how can I get the walking boot? And so they chose to put me in the walking boot, and I ended up on crutches. And I worked those first several weeks on crutches. Thankfully, my mom and her husband came and helped me for the first few weeks that I had to go to market on my own. But yeah, I worked right through it. I did not take a day off because of a broken foot. That was also the year of the tornado in Carstairs. So there was a tornado that landed about 5 miles west of my place, and the tornado was headed for my place. And I was headed for I took an afternoon. I was going to take an afternoon off and go to the Airdrie Rodeo, and I got a message on my phone saying there's a tornado headed for your house. So I left the rodeo and I went home, and sure enough, like that tornado had lifted off the ground 5 miles west of my place and went over, and there was, we had gotten some big hail. So what did I do? I was in my boot. I was with a broken foot. I was in my boot, and I went and I got my guys. I brought in guys from Mexico to help me, and I got them to put me in the bucket of the skid steer, and they lifted the skid steer up in the air, and they lifted me up to the greenhouse roof, and I got off the bucket of the skid steer, and I walked across my greenhouse roof in my boot with a broken leg or broken foot, and I was checking out my roof, because that's what you got to do. Like, that is some grit. That is what farmers do. They do what they got to do because they have to make their farm work. And so, yeah, that's just a little crazy story of mine, but that's the grit. You wonder where I get it from. You wonder why I'm a little rough around the edges. It's because I've got some grit. I got some, my joke is I've got bigger balls than most men, but really my balls hang on my chest. So yeah, grit. I have grit. So farmers are working 80 or 90 hours a week to do what they got to do. I was just talking to someone the other day, and they were saying their husband worked 26 hours straight to get the crop off. And I've heard of other farmers doing like even 48 hours straight. When we think of our trucking industry, they've got those logbooks. Yeah, farmers don't have logbooks. Farmers just work. And a farmer wouldn't listen to a logbook anyway. A farmer's not going to listen to a labor law or some bureaucracy. And if there's bureaucracy handed down to their employees, they're going to, figure ways around it. I did that too. One year we had in Alberta, we had the NDP party booked or got into power for one term in Alberta here, and they brought in these labor laws, and they tried to change the labor laws for greenhouse for your temporary or your seasonal agriculture workers, and they said they're only allowed to work 8 hours a day, and a farmer can't afford that. A farmer can't afford to pay overtime. That's just not going to happen. So what did I do? I got creative, because I had my field crop, which was considered agriculture, and my greenhouse, which was considered greenhouse, which is both agriculture, but I don't know, the government decided something different on that. I would send my guys into the greenhouse for 8 hours. They'd punch out, and then they'd punch back in under another time clock under the field crops, because they were so mad, because they wanted to work. They were here to work. They wanted to work more than 40 hours a week. I couldn't afford to pay overtime. So, but they want to work just even straight time. They're happy doing that. They're happy earning for their families and sending it back to Mexico. And we can get into a whole other, like, is that a problem or is that okay? But I could hire one Mexican guy and replace 3 Canadian workers with the way sometimes Canadians work. So, anyways, a squirrely rabbit trail, but yeah, like, farmers will work and do what they need to do. The government did, I do have to say, the government did backtrack on that rule and changed it. So farmers will do what they need to do. I had a sheepdog, so I had sheep on my farm, and I had the sheepdog, and she got pregnant, and she turned into a bit of a bitch. Like, honestly, she was kind of a mean dog. She had been out with the sheep 100% of the time. Like, she had never, even when I got her, she was so shy. You had to like corner her to catch her, to pet her. Like, she was just this shy sheepdog. She was meant to do a job. And so even from 8 weeks old, she was in with the sheep 100% of the time. And so she had puppies one year, and she got snarly. Once she clued in that she had babies, that mother instinct just, boom, took over, and you couldn't get near her for a while. I couldn't even get near her for a while. Ironically, my kids could get near her. But one day I was out in the shed and with one of my staff, and we weren't even really near her. And that sheepdog came and started snarling and barking and got vicious. She didn't bite that staff, but she got vicious. And you want to know what I did? I jumped in front of that snarling dog, teeth baring like I could have been bit, and I jumped between my staff and that dog because that's what you do. You know, when you're farming, you just do what you got to do. And I didn't even think. I didn't even think twice about doing that, jumping between this mean dog and my staff, because I had to A, protect my staff, and B, like it's not okay. And so I had to teach that dog, like this is not okay. And I just did what I had to do. And so, yeah, farmers they just got to do what they got to do. And so, yeah. It's your mindset. It's not even thinking half the time, which is a crazy thing to say, but I didn't think. I just worked, put my head down, got up in the morning, went to bed at night. Thankfully, I slept really well. That's the only thing that saved me. And I was working, 60, 70, 80, and 90 hours a week. Once I got up around 90, 100, I started to go a little squirrely, but yeah, farmers have more grit than most people in the world. So we want to get into the third reason, or the third thing, and why we need more small farmers. And this is where I'm headed to next with my new company, Dawn's Dirt. If you can see my hat, if you're on YouTube, you can see my hat. I got new hats that say Dawn's Dirt. You can see it in my videos, my Instagram. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook and all that. You'll see my new Dawn's Dirt hats in the videos. And so, yeah, we need more small farmers in the world. So yes, I was talking about like jumping up and down and being so upset. But at the same time, my debt load was so high on that farm that, my eyeballs, I was swimming. I was in over my head, taking a breath, bobbing up and down because my debt load was so, so, so high. Whereas now, like I am treading water without my arms, even just kicking my legs and my head's above water. And I'm doing this whole farming thing very easily right now because I don't have the debt load. And so this is what I'm saying. We need more small scale farmers without the crazy debt loads. Big farmers are in crazy, crazy debt, which is why they have to get bigger, bigger, bigger. But, if you're so lucky to be, or blessed, I'd rather use the word blessed, thankful, I don't know, appreciative. If you're able to be on a small homestead or a small acreage or a small quarter section of land or something like that without a whole lot of debt, you are in a wealth of opportunity right there to change our food system, really, because you're not going to be relying on it to service your debt. You're going to be relying on it to put your food on your table as well as other people's tables. And so, yeah, there's been a huge decline in small farms. And so what happens is small farms. So what happened with us? We built our first 36,000 square foot greenhouse, and hindsight, what we should have done, we should have added on another acre and another acre and another acre and another acre. And we should have built within, the first 5 years of being in business, we should have built up to 10 acres of greenhouse. That's how we would have survived. We would have played into the big system, and we would have gotten bigger, bigger, bigger. Instead, we had this big greenhouse that was too small for the big system and too big for the small system, for just the farmers market system. So we were in this weird limbo place, that it just didn't work. And that is why my farm didn't work. It's not because, it's not because small scale farming doesn't work. It's because I was too big for small scale and I was too small for big scale. So I was just in this really awkward spot. So yeah, so we've seen the food system go with more and more and more bigger farms, which means we're getting fewer and fewer and fewer choices. I was just watching a little video earlier of Monet Farms. So Monet Farms is a big farm. They started in Saskatchewan and they're all across Western Canada and down into the States, and they are massive. Growing up, we had this massive farm called Sauterglen Farms down the road from us. I grew up near Airdrie. Sauterglen Farms was owned by Mr. Stan Grad. Anyways, big farmer. He employed lots of people. It was a big farm back in the day, and recently it was sold out to Monet Farms, and it just kind of made me a little bit sad because it went from being this family operation, very large family operation, but a family operation, to a even bigger. And yes, it's owned by a family, but I mean, come on, they own miles and miles and miles. I think they said 350,000 acres in a year they farm or something like that, which is so, so big. And, when you think of a quarter section is 160 acres, 360,000, like that's massive, right? And they're into all the different things. And so, yeah, so if it ever came down to the government or the WHO or whoever, when it comes to them putting out mandates, like if you need to follow this climate mandate or we're going to call your loans. Well, the big farms are not going to be able to say no. They're not going to be able to resist because it's either that or lose your farm and the government takes it over anyway. So interestingly enough, in Canada, Farm Credit Canada owns most of the mortgages here in Canada, or farm mortgages here in Canada. They own my mortgage. I had great loans officers. I can't say anything bad about my loans officers. They were really, really great to deal with, and they went to bat for me many times. But Farm Credit Canada, so the government of Canada owns these mortgages, and so if we ever have it where climate bureaucracy or whatever health bureaucracy or anything comes down the pipes from bigger global world leaders, farmers are not going to be able to say no because it's either going to be that or they lose their farms. So it's just that's terrifying for me, and that's what I saw. That's what I started seeing back when I pulled out of farm or out of the grocery store. As I started seeing this bureaucracy come down the pipes, because we're going to have fewer and fewer and fewer choices in farms. We're going to have less and less and less small family farms, and we're going to have bigger and bigger corporations. And so but again, we the people have the power to change that, because even if you live in town, you have an opportunity. You can grow a garden in your backyard. I know people in the city of Calgary that were growing, they were doing several $1,000s a year in vegetable sales just off of their little backyards. And so you can do so much, even with a small space, even with a quarter section, you can do so much. So yeah, I had a 36,000 square foot greenhouse and I grew 20 acres of garden, which was actually very small for the industry. I was only able to service, this is something to remember too. When you're going to a farmer's market, ask, how much land do you have? How many vegetables do you grow? So a 36,000 square foot greenhouse plus 20 acres of garden, I could attend 13 to 15 farmers markets in a week, market days. And so, like Canmore Farmers Market was one market day. So I was only able to do that 13 to 15 in a week. And I sold, 800 to $1.2 million through those avenues. And so, yeah, like I was fairly big. I was big for the industry. But that's the thing. I employed people. I hugged the people that worked with me. I shook the hands of the people that bought my food. We had relationship. I was just telling the story to someone, this morning. I was saying, it was more about the relationship than the dollar that I brought in through my booth. And so I had a client one year, or customer one year, and she was deathly allergic to corn. She could not have corn of any type, of any kind, and whatever. And so some of the sprays, because yes, I did spray my food with organic sprays, but some of the sprays would have a corn base to them. And so, or I just didn't know what the ingredients were. I knew they were on the organic list, but I didn't know if it was corn. And so this customer would come to me and she would say, did you spray this or didn't you spray this? And I just was really honest and told her, because I would rather that she was safe with her food and got what she needed and was able to eat in ease whatever it was that I was producing, than to take it home and get sick by chance that there was a corn product in it. And so that's the thing. When you are a small farmer, or when you purchase from a small farmer, or when you become a small farmer yourself, because I want more small farmers. I think we need more small farmers, and there's such opportunity in small agriculture, small size agriculture, and working with your communities, that yeah, when you build those relationships, it's invaluable. It's better than the almighty dollar. And little tinfoil hat here, people always talk about, dollars this and dollars that, but if the digital currency comes in and you don't want to comply, or I'm from a Christian background, if the mark of the beast comes through and you're not going to comply because you're making a very big choice, then, you know, food is going to become a currency. And so when I think of my backyard right now and what I've got going on my small place, like I know I can feed my kids and my family for sure, but I know that I could feed other families, and that those chickens that I have in my freezer right now and those chickens that I'm even raising in the egg layers, they are my currency. They will provide food for my children and get me the things that I need, because if you don't have a dollar in your bank account, or you don't have a bank card, or you don't have a credit card, food becomes very valuable. Hey friends, on Dawn's Dirt, we get real about growing food, farming, homesteading, living free, and digging into the stuff that actually matters. If you're loving the dirt we're dishing out, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on your favorite social media platforms. That's how we keep growing this community of badass, soil-covered, chicken-loving, freedom-chasing humans. Like and subscribe to me on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Come be part of the movement. Well, and even too, on a small farm, the lessons are valuable. It used to be when you hired someone, you'd say on your resume, "Well, I'm a farm kid." Well, if you were a farm kid back in the day, you got hired instantly, because people knew that you had work ethic. They just knew that you had grit and you had what it took to work. And right now, I'm so proud of my three daughters. They're 14, 16, and 18. And I'll tell you, two of my daughters were up at 4:30 this morning and on their way to a farmer's market selling for my former farm, actually, which I'm so proud of them. But they worked a long day today and they'll do it again tomorrow. They're going to work another farmer's market tomorrow. And my other daughter's working for another farm to table store and for another farmer's market, as other farmers and things like that. So, farm kids, they just have something different in them. They know how to work. They know how to be the first one to, step up to the table when the job needs to get done. And yeah, so proud of my kids. And yeah, farm kids just know how to work different. And that's where I got it from. I was told to work. I remember one time I got fired. My dad fired me. So I always want to say, I used to always tell the joke that the only job I ever got fired from was from my dad. And I can't say that anymore, because last summer I had two jobs and I got fired from both, just because I have too much grit, too much tenacity, and too many brains. I forgot to leave them at the door. But one time my dad said, I asked him for the afternoon off or something like that. And he said no. And I said, well, that's fine. I quit. And I went into the house, and next thing you know, my dad came back into the house and he's like, you get your butt back out there and you better get to work. And so, like, I just had no choice. I had no choice. I had to work. And so, yeah, farm kids we're a totally different breed. And that gave me the tenacity and the grit that I needed to, carry on with my life and be self-employed and have my small farm, and now ultimately teach others how to have small farms. And so, yeah, so food freedom for sure is being eroded with the bureaucracy of grocery stores, with the bureaucracy of even farmers markets to some extent. And so we have but I look at that erosion and I see such an opportunity, because there is so many more people opening up their eyes to farm to table. When we saw the 2020 toilet paper wars and the shelves were empty, people are realizing you need to know where your food comes from, and you need to, have a system in place. And so whether that's buying from a local farmer or becoming a local farmer to provide food for others, it's so, so, so important. We have the upper hand. And so it's an opportunity. It's not a negative, it's an opportunity. And so, yeah, if you want to get into small scale farming, just as I have, and just as I would do, I mean, if I didn't have the non-compete clause, boom, I'd be having a garden and I'd be selling vegetables just like that, without question, without another thought. I'd be doing that again. I dream and eat and sleep and dream of those things at night. So yeah, so if you have a plot of land, from a backyard garden right up to a quarter section of land, or maybe several sections of land, and you want to do some farm to table sales, you want to take your food system back into your own hands, reach out to me, send me a DM, shoot me a message, and, let's do this. Let's build you a farm to table business. Let's build you a community of like-minded people to serve your community and your food system. Last night I had pork chops, beans, potatoes, and carrots. And where did it all come from? My backyard. I grew it all. I raised it all. I didn't do the butchering. Someone helped me with that, but it was my food. that I grew for myself and for my family, and that's what I ate for supper. And so, yeah, so important. I can't stress it enough. So thanks for tuning into the show today. Love, I love, I could talk about all this stuff till I'm blue in the face, or, I won't shut up. But yeah, thanks for tuning into the show today. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, all the different platforms. And if you've got questions, send them to me. Write me a message. If you just, or if you want to argue with me, even like if you didn't agree with something on the show today, like send it in to me and let's have a conversation. That's where it all starts. And so, yeah, appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.